All right, welcome back to another episode of Those Two Dudes, guys. It's that dude, Josh.
That's that dude, Ruben.
Hey, guys, we were quick to come on this episode. We had other topics that we wanted to talk about, but breaking news, OU, University of Texas are in talks of leaving the Big 12, joining SEC, essentially becoming a super group. We just had to clear the plate. We had to talk about this. And, of course, we had to include our UT Austin Longhorn correspondent, Mr. Austin Wells. Austin, how you doing, man?
Gonna be better, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I mean, if for everybody that knows, if there's one, the easiest way to get Josh and I to debate pretty heatedly is for us to talk about college football. This is definitely no different. So Josh, tell me, I know you don't like it. Why don't you like it?
We'll get into that in a second. Let's kind of go over why Texas would be interested in joining.
Okay.
SEC. Bottom line is money, right?
Money.
Money's driving all this on both sides. Texas would like to get in the SEC because they can make more money off of TV deals. The Big 12's contract with the ESPN ends, I think, in 2024, and that's when the SEC's contract begins with the ESPN. So SEC or ESPN is going to have exclusive rights with the SEC conference. So money is driving this thing on both ends. Same for Oklahoma. Texas is the number one revenue generating program in all of college athletics. I believe Oklahoma's in the top 10 as well. So the big thing here is money, because if you look at other things as far as why they wouldn't join, power, they lose power. They're not going to have as much power by joining the SEC. You got to deal with other powerful programs like Alabama, LSU, Florida, etc.
I strongly disagree, but keep going.
You have to deal with those programs, and I mean, there's 16 teams now. So competition-wise, you won't be as comfortable as well, because you'll again be dealing with more powerhouses. So as far as winning and losing goes, they've only won 3 Big 12 championships in the 25-year existence. I don't know what makes them think they'll win by going to the SEC. So money's the big thing behind this. And then we'll get into some other stuff in a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah.
Can I jump in on the money part too?
Go ahead, Austin.
It's not just money for the team or for the conference itself. It's also money for the players. So I got 3 words. There's name, image, and likeliness. Do you know anything about NILs?
Everything.
Yeah. So think about it. Bryce Young, the quarterback for Alabama, hasn't even played a single down yet, and he already has $1 million in endorsement deals. That's the kind of money these kids are going to get going to the SEC. They're not going to get that kind of money going to the Big 12. And OU and Texas realize that, and they think if we're going to get any recruiting power, not just power to recruit from those states, but for people to, or for kids just to get the money that they want, that they'll get somewhere else, they have no choice but to leave. So I think there's another big part right there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's money.
I don't know. Go ahead, Ruben. Go ahead.
No, it's just money. It's all money. It doesn't matter what the football records are. It's all about money. The football records are ideally going to come, with the competition. And look, you talked about, well, they're losing power. I would argue that they're not losing power. If anything, they're getting more power, because a big part of, recruiting and losing out on the top recruits and then losing out from A&M is A&M has the pitch right now that, we're the only Texas team in the SEC. People want to play in the SEC. That's why Texas is losing recruits. They're losing recruits to A&M because they're in the SEC, and they're losing recruits to people that are in the SEC. So imagine Texas going. The only team that this really hurts is Texas A&M. That's the only team that really hurts. And that's why the rumor is that they're the ones that dropped the leak that OU and UT are moving over to the SEC.
100%.
But it is all about money. The SEC.
It is all about money, and you think that this is going to be good for Texas and OU, but I don't know if it is, because again, the competition is going to be harder. Yeah, sure, jump to the SEC might bring you in more money if you could win. Well, it's going to bring more money in the TV agreement. It might help you recruit if you're winning, but if you go to the SEC and start losing, you're still not going to get those recruits over those teams. And Texas and OU definitely won't have more power in the SEC. What I mean by power is they kind of run the Big 12 in terms of the rules and stuff that the Big 12 do and set up. They have to listen to Texas and OU. Those are the big voices in the rooms when making rules and whatnot, and guidelines to the conference and the way they go about doing business. They won't have that kind of pull when they go to the SEC.
No, and that's true. That's
Like
true.
Alabama,
You're right.
Florida.
That is true. But also, the Big 12, it's very top heavy, right? It's OU and Texas, at least on popularity, not records, because records will tell you otherwise. But popularity wise, it's OU and Texas. And then a bit down is probably what? Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, maybe?
Sure, Iowa State, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
those
no doubt.
rotate. Yeah. Anyway.
And because of that, they have a lot of the power. The Big 12 knows that they need those teams in the conference, so they let them have the biggest voices in the room. They won't have that when they go to the SEC. I don't know how Texas is going to react to that. I don't even think they're going to have the Longhorn network when they go to that.
No. Yeah.
Hopefully not.
Part of the deal of going to the SEC is, I mean, they're not going to have a Longhorn network, and Alabama Crimson Tide will not allow Texas to have a Longhorn network being in the SEC. But that's fine, right? Because again, money talks. Last season, the SEC made $300 million more in revenue than the Big 12. That's a huge difference right there. I think, this is great because, again, right, it's top heavy, but I also think that it increases Texas's chances of assuming that the playoff is going to be expanded to 12 teams like you wanted. I think it increases their chances, because if the Big 12 is down that year, they're just going to get looked at in a negative way if you don't win the Big 12. You're not going to get looked at if you finish second in the Big 12 to make the playoffs, opposed to the SEC, where if you have 2 losses, you might still be considered because you're in the SEC. And also you talk about, well, they're going to have a hard time when they go to the SEC. Look at A&M. A&M came off of a mediocre year in the Big 12, in their last year of the Big 12. They go to the SEC, and the first year, what they win, like 10 games, 11 games? Something like that. With they had Johnny Manziel, and they gave Alabama fits at Nick Saban. So, they can shake things up. To say what happened in the past is irrelevant. They got a new coach. You have no idea what that's going to be. They have a new quarterback, a whole new system. Dude, there's no telling what Texas could do in the SEC.
Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs, but at the end of the day, they haven't won in the Big 12, and the SEC is going to be more difficult. And with 16 teams, it's great if you're one of those top 4 or 5 teams in the SEC, but there's 16 teams. Somebody's got to finish 14, 15, 16. So
now you see that.
And there's a lot of people going to be pulling out of the state of Texas once you bring in more Texas, and when you bring in Texas and Oklahoma, if they do end up going, it's not a foregone conclusion. But if they do end up going, you're going to have a lot more teams from SEC country able to pull recruits out of the state of Texas just by being on TV more in the Texas region. So you'll have that to deal with too. So you better be sure you're winning. If not, then it's going to be bad for you.
But again, right, that's a what if too. That's down the road. That's something you can't control. We're just talking about in the short term.
But if they were to stay in the Big 12, they would have power. And like you said, going to a 12-team playoff, they'd be able to be in the Big 12 and lose 2, possibly even 3 games and still get to the playoffs.
I disagree with that.
Iowa State had 3 losses last year, right? Or what were they? Yeah, I think they had 3 losses last year. They would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, but those are one-off years. Those are one-off years.
Iowa
Nobody's interested in seeing Iowa State play in a bowl game.
If that brand was Texas, though, there's no doubt they would be in the playoffs. So
exactly,
12 teams would be more than plenty for them to be in the Big 12, and there's going to be more money from the. They'll have their power. They'd be able to bring in more money by making the playoffs, which they'd be having a better chance to do if they stayed in the Big 12. So I don't know. So first of all, I don't know if it's great for Texas and OU in the long run. And moving past Texas and OU, I don't think it's good for college football as a whole. One, what is the 12-team playoff for outside of generating more money? It's to bring parity, to bring more teams to the conversation, to make the landscape of college football mean more than just the southeastern part of the United States. So this happening, that's just going to bring even more attention to the Southeastern Conference. Like, that'll be the only focus. Maybe that and a little bit of the Big Ten. So what does that do for the West Coast teams?
I disagree here.
Go ahead.
I think this is a great move for the Big 12 too. I think the Big 12 will now finally be able to thrive without the Longhorn Network being there in the first place. I think the reason why the past 2 teams, Missouri and A&M, left the Big 12, and ultimately why OU and UT will also leave the Big 12, is because of the Longhorn Network. It's a conference without a conference network and a one school network that kind of fucked everything up for everybody. And that's coming from a Longhorn. We can only watch specific games on the Longhorn Network. Half of us don't even have the Longhorn Network. So as far as a fan, it sucks. And as far as a business or an organization as a conference, it sucks too. So by UT and OU, mainly UT, moving to the SEC and therefore disintegrating the Longhorn Network, it's beautiful. And I think it's going to unleash the chains of the Big 12. I think that's the reason why every year during the Big 12 media conference, like that's going on right now, everyone, except for this year, everyone always asks, where are the other two teams? Are we getting any more teams in the Big 12? What's going on there? And there's always some bullshit excuse why we don't, why the Big 12 doesn't. But I think the reality is they want it and no one wants to come. And we're just too embarrassed to admit it and to admit why also. We're too proud to admit that the Longhorn Network was a terrible idea. And now that it's not here, I bet top teams will go to the Big 12. Ones who would have considered but ultimately chose not to in the past. I think it'll finally make it a much more attractive place to be. And what better team to go there than Texas A&M?
Yeah, that's a nice thought, but that's just not the reality.
I disagree. It can be a reality.
Just Texas going to the SEC and not Oklahoma, possibly. But without either one of those name brands being in the conference is on the verge of extinction. What's likely going to happen if Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC is teams are going to start, or other conferences are going to pluck the remaining 8 teams out of the Big 12. It's just not like Ruben said. There's Texas, there's Oklahoma, and then there's kind of everybody else in terms of brand or whatnot. They cannot make it. There's no brand name in there to sustain that conference and make it a power conference still. So
I agree, but there could be.
There could be.
Nobody's leaving. A&M's not going to leave the SEC to come back to the Big 12.
I disagree, Josh. I disagree. I think that they could. And I think the reason, because they had a gentleman's handshake with the SEC, which doesn't allow, when you go to the SEC, they have a gentleman's handshake that prohibits, when you come in, that prohibits your rival, if they're not in the conference, to join in the conference. So for the same reason that Georgia Tech is not in the SEC, for the same reason that Clemson is not in the SEC, those are the reasons, because there's a gentleman's handshake that their rivals cannot join the conference. So when Texas joined the conference, I mean, look, what did A&M say? We wanted to be the only school from Texas in the SEC. Who cares? Who cares what you wanted? Like that sounds so childish. Well, the SEC, they said that we could be the only ones in Texas in this conference. Shut up. That is so childish. So yes, I think what Austin is saying, I think they could leave and essentially flip-flop with Texas. And I think Arkansas could also leave and they would fit right in with the Big 12.
Because they came from the Southwest.
And on top of that, I think the Big 12 would also add 2 more teams.
Arkansas is not even an option. Like, they're okay with Texas and Oklahoma coming. The only 2 teams that I've heard that are saying no to this move of Texas and Oklahoma is A&M and Missouri. As far as Arkansas goes, I've heard nothing about them being a no.
Oh yeah, well, so then throw Missouri in the Big 12.
You need at least 11 yeses from SEC.
Yeah, you need 3/4 vote.
You have to have at least 4 no's for it to not happen.
They're not getting those 4 no's. Yeah, they're not getting those.
All I hear is A&M, and Missouri are the only 2 I hear are no's. Specifically A&M.
The 2 former conference.
The Big 12 conference people.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, oh, we don't want Texas.
Yeah.
So no, I think, I mean, look, okay, fine. Throw Missouri in the Big 12. You throw them 2, you trade them out for Texas and OU. It doesn't change anything logistically with the conferences. Maybe you could still shuffle them up a little bit if you wanted. You don't have to. The Big 12 could still remain. What happens to the Big 12?
I still don't even think that those are big enough brands to bring the Big 12 back.
I do agree with you. I don't know what's going to happen to the Big 12. I don't know.
Think about it too.
I think what ESPN wants, and I think what some of these big power people want, is for there to be 4 16-team power conferences, and just Big 12 just to break up. That's what I think they want, and I think that this would be the first domino for that to happen.
Maybe so, but you also got to think about opportunities for the Big 12 schools that might not have joined before for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Schools like University of Central Florida, maybe it's not a big brand name, but it never has been able to because it's never been in a Power 5. Maybe it has the opportunity to now. Teams like Boise State or just other fringe teams that are in Power 5 conferences.
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati would be a
Look,
great
if this
booster.
would have happened, yeah, if those teams were able to get invited and they were able to keep the Big 12 alive, then I'd be okay with this. But I see this changing the landscape of college football and eventually leading to many teams being kicked out of the FBS division, or what we call the FBS division now, altogether out of the FBS, which would be terrible. And look, right now what we have is chaos between the NIL, between playoff expansion, and now possibly more realignment. This is something that nobody's really talking about yet. I know Tim Brando talked about this in the past a little bit. But look, everybody's just out for their own, looking out for their best interest. College football has to get a commissioner, or what Tim Brando calls a czar, to look over and do what's best for college football as a whole. Right now, there's no one doing that. And with the NIL, there's no set guidelines for NIL. Each state's different, each conference is different, whatever, as far as the way players are able to go about making money. The 12-team playoff, you got everybody looking out for their own interests. What's best for their conference? What's best for their own team as far as, should we do this? Should we not do that? And then the same thing with realignment. Everybody, where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? And let's do what's best for us. Nobody's looking out for the best interest of college football right now at the end of the day. And right now, I think would be a great time for college football to grab a commissioner or a czar, something like that. And just to oversee what's happening and make sure that what's best for college football is happening at the end of the day. Right now, we don't have that.
I think, look, I've tried to tell you this before. Money makes the world go round. Money is number one all the time. And that's something you just have to understand. But in this specific scenario, money is more important more than ever, because think about it. We just came off of a season where we were in a pandemic, and a lot of these schools lost money. They lost so much money that they had to cut programs from their universities. So a lot of these teams, yeah, maybe they are thinking money and they're thinking financial, reasonings, but
sure, that's understandable. That's understandable. Yeah, we all know that these programs, the leadership of these programs are going to look out for the best interests of the programs, and that's fine. That's their job. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to be looking out for what's best for the sport as a whole altogether. And we don't have that. And that's why you see all this stuff happening all at once, and there's no real direction for all of it. And that's got to change if we want college football to remain great forever. Eventually, all this money's going to could mess stuff up because everybody's only looking out for their best interest.
I agree with you on the NIL stuff, because look, it is a good idea in theory, but they kind of just open those floodgates, and at this point there's no turning back. But it is already slightly frightening to see these players making $1 million already. And, like Austin said, for instance, Bryce Young, the quarterback from Alabama, he hasn't even officially been named the starter at Alabama. I think that's a foregone conclusion, but regardless, he hasn't officially been named. So for him to make $1 million, it's going to be scary. It's going to be scary coaching these kids that have some very thick pockets that essentially would be making more money than some of the coaches that coaching them. I don't know how they're going to control that, but it's too late. They're going to have to figure that out. There's no way you can reel that back in when this money's already hitting these kids' pockets. But we'll see how that goes. I don't know, but I think as a whole, I don't know what happens to the Big 12. I really don't. I think, like Austin said, adding somebody like Cincinnati, University of Central Florida, adding those two teams, and then adding two other teams, maybe like a Houston or maybe like a BYU, you can build the brand back up again. And if it still has an automatic bid, dude, that's great. And that's what you want, Josh. You wanted that. That's what you wanted for the playoffs. Yeah, imagine UCF coming to the Big 12. They win it.
Like I said, if the Big 12 could survive all this, then I'll be okay with it. The main thing I don't want is just to go to some 4-team super conference thing that's just going to ruin college football as we know it. If the Big 12 can make it out of this alive, I don't think they will, but if they can, then yeah, I'm okay with it. So pulling maybe Cincinnati and Memphis, and then maybe BYU and Boise State or a Houston or a SMU or whatever, one of those type of squads. Yeah, sure, that'd be great. If they can make it, awesome. I just don't see how it's going to work. So,
So then
Hey,
tell
Josh,
me,
I got a question for you.
you know,
Who would you name commissioner?
man.
Dwayne Johnson.
Overall, I don't have
Obvious.
nobody in specific. I mean,
probably
Maybe-
an
maybe-
alumni of
maybe-
Central Florida.
maybe if Greg Sankey of the SEC wanted to step out of his commissioner role and be the overseer of all of college sports, I'd be okay with Greg Sankey.
Okay. I mean, that's hard because like who's going to vote that person? Because there is no leader. How do you come up with the leader? Right.
Especially because everyone hates that leader in every professional sport.
Yeah. So like, how do you,
Right, but it's
how do you then
necessary.
come up with a leader like that? I mean, I just don't like, again, it's a good thought in theory. I don't see that happening, which is why ideally the easier option is to have all these commissioners that are in place of the conferences work together.
That doesn't work. Obviously, because they're all going to look out for what's best of their own conference, not for each other's conference. That's not going to happen.
That's
What
true.
has to happen is you
It's
get
like-
10 conference commissioners, maybe some ADs, some school presidents, etc., all together, and they have, I don't know, you have some people come in for an interview, whatever, and you have a vote and you pick one. Whatever the majority vote is, that's who you go with.
Hey, if 4 families of organized crime can survive for decades in New York with the commission themselves, I think it could happen in college football too. They never had a single leader. They just had 4 families, and they meet up every now and then. You know,
Yeah, they met up at Olive Garden or whatever famous Italian
right,
restaurant
yeah.
they had.
the OG.
But man, I mean, I hear you, dude, and obviously there's a lot of, this isn't set in stone. It's still in the works. The Big 12 had a call tonight with all the commissioners. I think it's saying something that the only ADs that weren't on the call were Oklahoma's AD and Texas's AD. So, we'll see how it plays out. I do hope that the Big 12 remains. I really do, but I'm not sure that they will. But I think that they should, and I think they should keep their at-large bid. Other stuff preventing.
Well, right. If we go to this 12-team playoff, one of the things was there was no conference that's guaranteed a spot in the playoff. It's just the 6 top ranked conference champions that get an automatic spot in. But that would likely include the Big 12 if they're still a formidable conference at the end of the day. But again, there's no guarantee for any conference technically, is what I'm saying.
And another hangup in this whole thing is the state of Oklahoma has a legislation in place. I don't think it's a real legislation. Instead, it's more of a formal handshake, but it prevents Oklahoma State and Oklahoma from separating each other from the same conference.
I've heard that that's not true. I don't know.
And like I said, it's another
another.
gentleman's handshake. It's not an actual real legislation.
Okay,
but
maybe that's what it is.
According
But-
to Oklahoma State, that they are going to fight
I've
that.
also heard one more thing. I also heard is that obviously the Houston Chronicle is the one that broke this news yesterday. Somebody from the Houston Chronicle.
Yeah.
But apparently the source that gave that person the information or whatnot, supposedly this is coming from A&M
Yeah.
as far as a last-ditch effort to try to prevent the move,
Yeah.
to try to get Texas and Oklahoma legislation involved to block this move. I don't know. I'm not sure how any of that works legally and whatnot, so I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I think for the simple reason that it's a gentleman's handshake, dude. At the end of the day, it's not going to mean anything. It really isn't. All that's going to matter is those votes that come in through the SEC unproven. And like you said, all I've heard is actually A&M was the only team that was against it. Throw Missouri in there too. Sure, I'm not sure,
Yeah,
but
the first time hearing that, but I believe it.
either way, that's still less than what they need to prevent OU and UT from joining the SEC. So, I mean, I don't know. I've heard another theory, if UT is serious about leaving the Big 12, maybe they should go independent. I don't really agree with that. Honestly, I don't even like that Notre Dame is independent because I've heard rumors of them looking to shop around and get in a conference because they realize, even though they have all their games exclusively on NBC, they just played in the ACC last season through the pandemic. Through that pandemic, they made more money in the ACC than they ever had in any season. And they're starting to realize that you can make a lot more money when you join a league. So, I mean, I don't know if the ACC, if they go there, obviously it makes sense, logistically speaking, to join the Big Ten. But I think that they would be joining a conference much sooner than later. I don't know that they want to stay independent. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you think the Big 12 is done then if they leave?
If they leave, yeah, probably so. And then you start thinking about like teams like Kansas. Who's going to pick up Kansas? I know they're really good in basketball and whatnot.
Sun Belt. Or
yeah, man, that would be terrible for Kansas. I mean, the Sun Belt's it's been much better.
Kansas isn't going to any of those conferences. You got to think more besides just football too. Kansas invented basketball.
Right. No, I know they're great in basketball, but
I could see Kansas in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I could see Kansas in the Big Ten. I could see.
So what does that do to? I mean, look, the SEC is going to be bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. What the Big Ten is going to be bringing in Kansas and Iowa State,
and probably Kansas State. Yeah.
No, I think they already got. What do they got? I guess they got. How many teams?
I mean, you can shuffle it around. It doesn't matter. You can shuffle it around. You can add another team if they need to. You could get rid of teams. I don't know. You could shuffle it around.
Get rid of teams. That's what sucks. Some of these teams will probably get left out. Kansas, maybe. I don't know.
But if they get left out, think about it. If they get left out, that means they don't matter, and there's a reason. So, there's a reason they got left out.
I'm the person that thinks all the teams matter. Why would they just not matter just because they don't bring in as much money? That's dumb.
No, it's not that they don't bring in much money. It's because nobody's watching them.
Because, but at the end of the day, that also comes.
They all say the same thing.
Yeah,
they say the exact same thing
together. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
We'll see where this goes.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes, man. I don't know. I mean, I do feel bad for if the Big 12 doesn't survive. I do feel bad for teams. I think Baylor will be okay. I could see them going to the Pac-12. Especially with how good their basketball and baseball teams are.
I don't see what this does for the Pac-12 either. Their best bet's probably bringing in a BYU and a Boise State. Bringing in maybe Baylor just to get some
Texas
market for recruits. Yeah. But as far as actual branding for the conference, who cares? Who cares about those teams?
Well, according to you, all teams should be cared for.
I'm talking about as far as fans, eyeballs watching because of those name brands.
Well, can you imagine watching a Pac-12 game in Central Time Zone? That's appealing.
Yeah.
For the Pac-12.
Okay, that's what we're talking about.
No, I'm talking about for fans. I don't know if fans really care about those teams. I mean, those teams.
Okay, well, if we're gonna go down that road, then let's throw out the Mid-Atlantic Conference.
The SEC would have Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida. What? I mean, come on. That's too much. I think that hurts college football. That's too much power in one area. What are you gonna watch? USC, Oregon. Who else?
Dude, you don't want to see the classic matchup of Washington versus Baylor?
Oh my goodness. Very appealing. No, that's what I'm saying. I think it hurts college football. That's at the end of the day, what's best for college football. Somebody's got to do something, but
I think the idea of having Pac-12 games in a Central Time Zone conference games, I think that is appealing. I really do. Because you can play later at night, you can play earlier at night and it'd be a night game. You don't have to worry about the game coming on at 11 p.m. our time. It just matters. It's a big deal. People, especially in the Central Time Zone and even especially the Eastern Time Zone, the recruits don't want to go to the West Coast because then their families can't watch their games because they play, their time zones are all messed up.
I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, you got any final thoughts before we end this?
I think it's a great idea. I look forward to the announcement coming out of UT and OU joining the SEC. I think, like Austin said, I think the Longhorn Network was a mistake, and I think there'd be plenty of UT people that would admit that. But it is what it is, and I obviously had the Longhorn Network never been born, maybe A&M doesn't leave. The Big 12.
Exactly.
Maybe Nebraska, Colorado, they don't leave. Missouri doesn't leave.
I just can't wait to beat the hell out of A&M on the first game and scream SEC in that stadium in their faces. That's going to feel really good.
what would you think? What would you think of A&M if UT joined the SEC and then A&M left to join the Big 12? What would you think of A&M?
That's exactly what it would. It would make them look terrible. First of all, also they'd be leaving money behind, like especially with OU and Texas.
But they'd have the power. What did you talk about? They'd have the power you talk about in the Big 12.
No, look, OU and Texas leaving, yeah, they have the power, but with them leaving, they'll have power.
Then they leave, and then A&M comes in and takes that power. A&M's a bigger program than Tech or Baylor or TCU.
As far as the Big 12 goes, when they renegotiate a contract with whatever network it's going to be, because it's not going to be ESPN, they're not going to get nearly as much money in those negotiations. Like I hear that every SEC school is going to be bringing in $44 million per year. I think the Big 12 is currently at $35 million. That's about to drop from 35 to who knows what, maybe 25 million. So why they're not going to leave 20 million a year from the at least. I've heard the value goes up if Texas and OU joins to possibly up to 60 million a year, which is insane. And the Big 12 is going to be somewhere probably around 25, 30 without Oklahoma and Texas in there. So they're not leaving the SEC for that.
I can see NBC Sports Network now, just like this behind the tree, just waiting for the Big 12 rights.
Yeah. So somebody's going to grab them because it's not a terrible conference still, but if they stay alive, but it's not going to be nowhere near what the SEC bringing in, is what I'm saying. Final thoughts. I can't stand Texas. I grew up a Texas fan, but stuff like this happens all the time, and it makes me hate them more and more.
Would it make you feel any better if the Big 12 added Texas State?
Sure, that's irrelevant though.
No, it's not irrelevant. Would it make you feel any better?
That ain't gonna do nothing. I mean, if the Big 12 is what it is right now, shoot, the Sun Belt's on the verge of being just as good as that group of teams. So that does nothing for Texas State either, possibly. Texas State actually got a decent contract extension with ESPN today themselves through 2031, including 50% more games being showed on their main ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPNU channel. So
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that you knew that breaking information.
Anyway, yeah.
So by all those channels, you mean ESPNU, right?
Probably, but still,
Yeah.
that's
still a big step. That's good.
Better than ESPN Plus.
Aren't they? Isn't Texas State the doormat of the Sun Belt Conference?
I would say UL Monroe, but we are right there.
Why you gotta be like that, huh?
Oh man. Okay, well, look, I obviously we want to close this out because we'll agree to disagree on this. But here's an interesting idea. I'm just throwing this out there, right? This is something that probably nobody's even talked about. What if the Big 12 remained? They added maybe 2 to 4 other teams, not so powerhouses, but maybe the winner of their conference played the winner of, let's say, a Mountain West or a Conference USA, their conference, and the 2 winners of that game got an automatic bid in the playoffs.
So you mean like a sisterhood, like a sister conference?
Yeah.
12.
So basically one big conference with 2 huge divisions.
No, and I'm not and they can alternate. It can alternate every year based on their rankings or based on the strength of that particular conference. But, this gives them the opportunity, those conferences, including conferences like the Sun Belt, the MAC, Conference USA, the AAC, stuff like that.
So this is, another scenario. I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit, but another scenario is the AAC plucking some of those remaining Big 12 teams to strengthen their bid for being a power conference. They're close. They're close right now to being a power conference, and maybe pulling a couple of those, maybe West Virginia, Oklahoma State, might be able to push them over that bar where they need to be. But
there you go. We're starting to get you to think in the right direction.
But the reason I see that to be unlikely is because the Big 12 still has way higher. They're still going to bring in way more TV money. Unless maybe if you bring in some of those teams, maybe that shifts it, because all these TV agreements are going to be coming up in like 2024 or so. So maybe with the Big 12 losing Texas and Oklahoma, if the AAC was able to get some of those other teams, then maybe the AAC can get in better TV deal than the Big 12 could at that point. So yeah, it's possible that happens too.
But this
I
also
don't know. There's so many things that could happen. There's so many things that could happen. We just gotta wait.
this also isn't unprecedented. Look what happened in the 90s. The same thing happened to the Southwest Conference. That conference went under and it became the Big 12 with I think what Arkansas and was there another team that left to the
U of H.
was it U of H?
Sure.
But Arkansas left to the SEC and then U of H went to I Conference USA.
Yeah,
Maybe, I don't know.
SMU was part of that
Yeah.
Conference too. They went.
So this isn't
Yeah, some
unprecedented.
teams got
This
left out.
happens.
Some teams got left out, sure, but at the same time, that was more conference realignment. That wasn't really a redefinition of who's playing at the FBS level or what's called the Division I Single A level. All those teams were still part of. They were in smaller conferences, but they were still part of the Division I Single A level. What I could
I mean, I don't think that's in the conversation now. Though I don't see Kansas State going to an FCS. Like, we're saying the Division I level, right? Or FBS, and no one's.
Yeah. So yeah. I don't see Kansas State per se, but there could be teams like specifically teams in some of the smaller conferences, like say the Conference USA or something. Or
He's talking like a Tulane or like a school like that. They could fall off.
They get knocked down because someone takes their spot.
Yeah.
They can get knocked out
they're just not part of the
going to
consolidation.
the 14, 16 power conferences. That just leaves 64 teams. And if you focus on a league with only those 64 teams, there's currently 130 Division I Single A teams. Then that'd be half of the Division I getting kicked out to some, I guess, another lower level. I don't know what they would be, their own level. I don't know. But yeah, when that stuff happened in the 90s and even in 2012 when realignment started happening, there was no really redefinition of classifications for the specific teams and whatnot. So I don't know. As long as that doesn't happen, maybe this could be good. I don't know. Maybe it'll come back and bite Texas and Oklahoma and be good for other teams. But I don't know. Again, you got to wait and see.
I did hear, I don't know if it was Mike Leach or somebody else, but they said that they want more than a 12-team playoff, that they wanted a 64-team playoff.
Mike Leach was just being funny, probably. Yeah.
I don't know that he's being funny. That's just his way of thinking, because Mike Leach is so far off the radar, people could never get a read on him.
That's possibly true too. I don't know. I'm guessing he was joking, but yeah, like you said, I don't really know. Sure.
Now, even if he is serious, Mike Leach is a coach in the SEC. So, is 64 too many teams?
Yeah, dude.
Okay. I mean, I know it is. I just want to hear what Josh has he thinks about that.
I would say my ideal is 16, but the most I would do is 24, which is the same the FCS does.
Oh, dude. There you go. Well, hopefully that video game will come out sooner than later so you can have your wish on that game, because that ain't happening in real life.
What, FCS game?
Not right now.
Oh, a 24-team tournament.
There's plenty of people and some mainstream, I guess, commentators or TV heads or whatever. There's people calling for a 16-team playoff stuff. But yeah, right now, probably, I mean, obviously 12 is the idea right now, but I wouldn't say 16's out of the question in the future. So maybe
I agree. Well, it's not, because it'd be the same amount of rounds, right? So it would add 2 games to it, but it wouldn't add a round. I think going further than that is what's difficult, because each round equals an extra week. It's harder in football than a different sport.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. But they're able to do a 24-team playoff in the FCS. I think all the top seeds have a bye. I don't know how many teams there are. They have a bye, but I think some of the top seeds get a bye. But they make it work, and they have, I think, a few less teams than FBS football does. But anyways, and they play. And another argument you hear is that they're going to be playing too many games, but with expanding the playoffs. But FCS, they play. North Dakota State a couple of years ago played 16 games on their run to a national championship, and they have less scholarship players than FBS teams do. So that's nonsense argument that you hear from.
Yeah, there's also nothing else to do in North Dakota. But
I'm making a point. Who cares about North Dakota? That's for FCS football.
I mean, yeah, but like the point you're making is like, well, the major leagues want this. Well, if the little leagues can do it, then so can the majors. Like, no, it's not really.
Yeah, I mean, they have more scholarship players. They have more money. They have better training. They have better everything. Of course, they can do it if they want to do it. Anyways, let's end this. Austin, do you have any final thoughts?
No.
Okay.
What do you think is going to happen,
anyways,
Austin?
Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, not a problem. What I think is going to happen is I think the move's going to happen. And I think the Big 12 is going to pivot and it's going to be free of the Longhorn Network chains. And they're going to thrive. It might not be right away. There will be some dark days, but they will come back and be bigger and better than ever without UT.
Cool.
Okay, that sounds good. I hope you're right about that. If that does, I hope the move doesn't happen. But if it does, I hope your theory, your idea. I hope that's right.
Thank you.
Anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll throw a celebration party when OU and UT gets selected to go to the SEC, and then A&M gets released from the SEC contract and ends up joining the MAC. So we'll throw a party for that as well. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll see what happens. Stay tuned, guys. We're gonna do conference breakdowns starting next week. Starting with the Big Ten and the SEC. Obviously, a lot to talk about there. But football season is right around the corner. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Thumbs up. Press the notifications button. Tell your friends. YouTube, Those Two Dudes. Instagram at Those Two Dudes Podcast. Spotify, Those Two Dudes. We're on Facebook as well and Twitter. Check us out. Tell your friends. Let us know what you want to hear. Let us know what you think about this whole nonsense. Is it even right? Are we headed in the right direction with this super conferences, or should we tone it back? Is the Big 12 okay? Will they make it? Who should they add? Where, if they don't make it, where are these teams going to go? Let us know, guys. Let us know. Appreciate the time. Austin, appreciate you joining us, man. Love chatting with the UT. I know we'll be sure to have you back when we start filming some live episodes at UT football games, I'm doing right now. But yeah, appreciate the time. Thanks for being here. It's been that dude, Josh.
That's that dude, Ruben.
Like and subscribe. Push the button. Let's go.